What gets measured gets managed. You've also heard from one of your business mates that they have the right KPIs in place, and so you ask yourself, why isn't it working in our business? Why so many attempts at KPIs and performance measures fail, and what you should do to avoid this happening in your business. People often think and say, the problem is because we were working with the old model of KPIs, but we should be working with the new model of OKRs. It's like noticing your car's not performing well, and instead of opening the bonnet, you think the problem's the dashboard, but your engine's still broken. Comparing your real-world situation with someone else's filter story, it's unfairly demoralizing. Let's go to some McKinsey research on performance management systems. 54% say their current performance management systems don't actually have a positive impact. The finish line is viewed as once we've given it to the staff, the job is done, when actually that's when the work begins. So what should you do differently? If you can properly follow these 5 steps, you'll be well ahead of the others. Welcome to Lead to Grow, the podcast where we explore the people principle, how human success drives business performance. I'm your host, Tommy Sim, and today we're going to explore why many performance management systems don't work, common mistakes that occur, and what you should do differently. Now, you've heard implementing the right performance measures are key to success for your business. What gets measured gets managed. Where attention goes, energy flows, and other great sounding clichés. You've also heard from one of your business mates that they have the right KPIs in place, and that's what truly drives performance. So you ask yourself, why isn't it working in our business? Do you have the wrong KPIs, or is there some other problem that we can't see? In today's episode of Lead to Grow, we're going to unpack the question of why so many attempts at KPIs and performance measures fail, and what you should do to avoid this happening in your business. If you're looking to get a better result from your approach to measuring and managing performance, then this episode is the one for you. Let's start off by looking at the role that KPIs and other performance measures are intended to play in helping your people to succeed and ultimately enhance your business performance. It's commonly driven by one or more of the following. Now, number one is lack of achieving key outcomes. The people within the business, or at least one or more, they're not delivering on the outcomes that are most important. They're potentially working hard, completing tasks, but they're just not achieving what's truly valuable. And the business leader and their managers identify that those expectations have not been clearly set. And number two is when employees say they don't know what success looks like. Could it come out of a survey, or they're just asking for a review and clarity. Please note that when employees ask for a performance review, they're often asking for a pay review, and it's important to know the difference. Number three is an existing system is just not working. There may exist a performance review process that's quite vague, doesn't properly assess performance, or it's just like an awkward chat at the end of the year without clear measurables to base performance on. There is a want and a need to enhance the rigor. Number four is implementing a new strategy or a change in direction. So the business is updating, clarifying, or just implementing a new strategy. This can give rise to an update to performance measures to align them. So as a result of one or more of these factors, just say you decide you need to implement some clear KPIs. Now, before I move on, let me clarify one point, because I've used the term KPIs being key performance indicators. And some of you might be thinking, hey, we moved on from KPIs. We're now into OKRs, objectives and key results, or some other variation. So that doesn't distract you from the key insights from this episode, I want to cover off the differences and similarities between OKRs and KPIs. Because without any other changes than just moving to these new ways, it's not going to solve your problem. So now let's look at KPIs and OKRs. Both of them are tools to set direction and manage performance. They're designed to focus that attention on what matters. And they rely on measures and metrics of some sort. They can exist at a company level, a team level, or individual level, and they need clarity to work properly. They depend on leadership judgment and discipline, and neither work well if they're just not defined well. Now, both can drive the wrong behavior if they're designed or used badly, so from a distance, they're not that different. Where they differ is what they're actually designed to do. So KPIs are primarily about monitoring performance. They're answering the question, how are we going? They tend to track the ongoing health of the business, like output, quality, efficiency, financial performance, and customer metrics. They're usually stable over time, and they don't change very often. You can have leading indicators that are designed to give you a heads up about what's about to happen, or you can have lagging indicators that are what the business ultimately wants, but it's known later on. OKRs, on the other hand, are primarily about direction and focus. They're answering a different question, which is, what are we trying to achieve in this period? They're typically time-bound, like quarterly or annual, and they're structured a bit differently. So you have an objective, which is a qualitative statement of intent, then your key results, which are the measurable indicators that tell you whether you're making progress or not. Rather than monitoring business as usual performance, OKRs are often used to translate strategy into near-term priorities. They're about choosing where to put attention and effort, not just tracking what's already happening. Another difference is how success is defined. With KPIs, success usually means hitting or maintaining a target, whereas with OKRs, success is often defined as progress towards the objective, even if it's not fully achieved. And finally, they differ in terms of flexibilities. KPIs stick around, whilst OKRs are expected to change as priorities shift. So that's the factual distinction. Same category of tool, just a different intent, different use cases. Now, why knowing the differences and similarities is important? Because people often think and say, the problem is because we were working with the old model of KPIs, but we should be working with the new model of OKRs. So they spend all this time and effort moving over to OKRs, believing things will be better. But they haven't solved the core problem that resulted in the KPIs not working. And then they spend a lot of time and effort wasted, which could be avoided. It's like noticing your car's not performing well. It's kind of sluggish, burning too much fuel, lights coming on. And instead of opening the bonnet, you think the problem's the dashboard. So you replace your dashboard with a brand new digital one and things look better. The layout's clearer, there's more information, but your engine's still broken. And so if the engine is the problem, a better dashboard won't save you. So whether you have KPIs or OKRs, if you feel that you're not achieving the results as intended, you may find that answer shortly. So far, I've been talking assumptively that the performance measurement initiative is not actually working. And I mentioned at the start that this was commonplace. Now, if you listen to this point, chances are there is some truth to it, at least for some. However, a good number of business leaders will talk very favorably about what goes on in their company when speaking with other business leaders, and it can lead to a false sense of imposter syndrome. That is, because you know in detail what's going on in your business and you only hear the favorable snippets from other business owners, you may think that you're the only one who hasn't figured it out yet. It's kind of like social media. People talk in social settings about how great things are working, or even on LinkedIn for that matter, the actual social media where that happens. But comparing your real-world situation with someone else's filtered story is not only inaccurate, it's unfairly demoralizing. So be kinder to yourself. But how prevalent is it really? That is, performance management systems not having a positive impact on performance. Let's go to some McKinsey research on performance management systems, where they surveyed 1,800 business professionals globally, which found that more than half of the respondents, 54%, say their current performance management systems don't actually have a positive impact on employee or organizational performance. So this study included both managers and non-managers, so potentially even some of that 46% who said it did have a positive impact, merely wanted it to be true if they happened to be part of the design team. Harvard Business Review, they published multiple studies showing that traditional performance management systems consume loads of managerial time, yet fail to improve performance in most organizations. In some firms, leaders were spending millions of hours each year managing a system with very little to show for it. Therefore, if you're thinking that everyone else has it figured out and you're the only one, chances are that's not the case. So what goes wrong when managers implement KPIs? Now, there are a number of causes which could include any or all of the following 7 reasons. Number 1, they measure what's easy to measure, resulting in trivial matters being ticked off, whilst more important and relevant areas are not tracked at all. The motivation for this one's simple. Managers are looking to avoid the debate as to whether or not an outcome was achieved. See, if the measure is binary, there's no argument, there's no debate, we don't need to exert emotional energy, and this can be very attractive for a lot of managers. Now, the problem is that that's demotivating for high performers who are truly performing well, and it allows low performers to tick off the seemingly important measures whilst ignoring what's actually important. Or otherwise, they're told that they're not performing, even though they're hitting their KPIs, which can erode trust. Now, number 2 is that they're not measurable, therefore resulting in a vague representation of performance. So conversely, the performance outcomes required are relevant, but they're just this vague description that is unclear whether it's occurred or not. For example, deliver an outstanding customer experience. That's okay as an overall objective, but we need to know if we've achieved it or not. Now, in some ways, OKRs, because it separates objectives from key results, that can help frame it, but even the key results at times are not measurable. For instance, if we go, customer satisfaction improves significantly, which leads us to number 3, they can't gain quality information to measure results. Now, the obvious answer to the previous point will be, hey, let's include a customer satisfaction measure or a net promoter score. Okay, great. Do you have that information? Is there a large enough sample size to be reflective of performance? These are questions that need to be answered before we roll it out. Another common one might be 4-hour turnaround time for email responses. Again, you need to be able to properly track this if you're going to include it. Furthermore, this can fall into that bucket of a binary measurement, so it's either 4 hours or not. But is it one of the most important things to measure? Which leads me to the next one. So number 4, they have too many KPIs, therefore making the system too difficult to track and manage. Whether it's OKRs, KPIs, the common letter in there is the K, which stands for key. If your list is too long, then technically you don't need to have that K and you can just have ORs or PIs because you've attempted to measure everything. Now, the problem with this is both dilution of focus and it becomes a full-time job just to track everything. Following up becomes too much trouble. This is the common reason for the next one, which is number 5. Managers lose interest in the performance system. So their lack of follow-up proves them to be mostly useless. The set and forget mentality is all too common. Much of the effort in performance measurement is often placed on defining the measures. It's no different to many things in life that we have energy for. The best energy usually comes at the start because that pain is real. Then hours on end in boardrooms discussing, debating what should be included or not. And in order to not miss anything, the list becomes longer and longer. The finish line is viewed as once we've given it to the staff, the job is done, when actually that's when the work begins. But by that stage, so much effort has gone into the design that the tendency can be to want to just move on to something else. Which leads us to number 6, which is they don't involve the team in developing them. So staff feels that KPIs are punitive or a controlling mechanism. The approach to try and perfect those KPIs and then launch them to staff can come across as the KPIs are being done to the team. The message can sometimes be that management is dissatisfied with their performance and feels there's a need for this greater control. Number 6 is they don't involve the team in developing them. So staff feel that the KPIs are punitive and a controlling mechanism. KPIs are meant to help people focus on the right things, and sometimes can be taken that way and sometimes cannot be taken that way. So if you don't involve staff, they can sometimes think, hang on, what is this thing you're trying to get me to do? Is it just management control? Are you genuinely motivated to help the team or just trying to say, hey, we don't trust you? So it's this balance between getting something reasonably right, getting a clear message to the team, but also saying to them, we want your feedback. We want your view. And by having this process of implementation that gets people involved, you can get closer to truly relevant measures and get them brought into the system. Number 7, they view KPIs as the solution, not just part of the solution. Now, this is perhaps one of the most important mistakes that is made. Getting the right measures in place can be part of a successful performance management system, but it's certainly not the only thing you need to do. Because say you get those right measures in place and you track them and people know about them, but no one's achieving them. So what do you do then? Do you fire everybody? Maybe. But what happens if the same thing happens with the next group? It's a lot of time and money to waste in learning that you need to do more than just set the right performance measures, not to mention the impact on culture. The end result is that a lot of KPI programs are abandoned because they're too hard and they're just not achieving the desired result. So what should you do differently? If you can properly follow these 5 steps, you'll be well ahead of the others. And I do emphasize doing so properly because you could follow these steps in an ineffective manner and it won't make things better. Number 1, include performance measures as part of an integrated people system. If you imagine that your performance measures indicate how things are going, Then there's everything else that drives performance. As in, if we go back to that analogy of the car dashboard, it's the rest of the vehicle, the engine, the tires, the brakes, the oil, the other parts. To bring it back to the topic of your people system, those areas can include things like, of course, hiring the right person whose strengths align to the job, providing role clarity, providing effective training and development, ensuring you have capable leaders to lead the team, giving your people sufficient tools and technology to perform the job, your processes and procedures that actually work, and more. The important thing here is not simply to implement the performance measurement and then expect things to work better as a result if you don't have these other important parts working effectively as well. And number 2 is identify what success looks like in words and then make it smart. I mentioned earlier that the trap people fall into when implementing performance measures is to simply track what's easy to measure. Rather than doing this, I suggest you start off describing what success looks like just with words. It doesn't matter how vague your description is, just make a start. For example, if you say customers are happy or we deliver tasks accurately and on time, that's totally okay to begin with, because otherwise you're going to sit there with writer's block and there's not going to be anything written down. So you just write a list of descriptions. Then once you're comfortable that that's kind of the right areas, then apply the SMART principle. That's SMART. This stands for specific. Is the KPI clearly defined? So there's no ambiguity as to what's included, excluded, and being measured. Is it measurable? Is there a clear, reliable way to know whether the KPI has been achieved or not, and to what extent? Actionable. Can the individual or team meaningfully influence this KPI through the day-to-day actions? By the way, some people use achievable for the A instead of actionable, but I find that's a bit of a double up with the next one, which is realistic. Because when using achievable, we miss an important factor that actionable fulfills that is worth including. Realistic. Is the target achievable given the current context, capability, and constraints without setting people up to fail or disengage? And the last one is time-based. Is the time frame or frequency for measuring and reviewing this KPI clearly defined? Now, number 3 is to involve the right people within a clear set of boundaries. People often ask me about when to consult with staff, when not to, who to consult with. There's 2 things to consider with this one. Firstly is to consult when there are meaningful contributions that can be provided. If you're certain of a decision, then avoid consulting with people on that decision. Because you're asking for a view, then there's a risk that you're going to go the complete opposite direction. And they're going to, well, why did you ask us? Very often you don't actually need to ask them for their opinion on things that you're certain of, and they may not think that that's required. For example, you may want to measure the number of a certain type of client meeting that takes place. And you also want to measure that it was a quality meeting that takes place. So if you're sure that you're going to do this, and there's no need to consult on this, you can just explain it. However, consulting with the team on what actually makes a quality meeting could be a good idea in this situation, because there could be some aspects you haven't thought of. Also, it might highlight some development gaps if some of the team are way off the mark, and you can work with them on understanding a different perspective. And the second thing is to consider the status, perspectives, and influence of different people when consulting with the team. If there's an individual or individuals who have a disproportionately higher level of experience, knowledge, and importantly, status within the team, it's worthwhile gaining their thoughts earlier. They will often feel that this is warranted, and other team members are not likely to get upset if this is the known order of things. Why this also helps is those individuals are often more influential in the team. They are also likely to have more specific views, and they can feel part of the change rather than it being something that they just have to do. Their involvement is likely to lead to others to be more positive about the change, because they'll potentially look towards that person as kind of like a gauge on how to think and feel. Now, the fourth thing you can do is to schedule and make time for the right follow-up actions. The amount that you think you need to follow up is often more than what you expect. This is especially the case when you've dedicated a lot of time and energy behind closed doors that your team has not participated in. So for you, a lot has happened in terms of thinking and discussions, but for them, it's likely less so, even if you have involved them. The amount of time and effort you put into following up not only provides space to keep things moving in the right direction, it sends a message to the team as to how important this is to you. If you say it's important, but not important enough for you to spend energy on, then those actions will speak louder than your words. The fifth thing is to train and develop your people leaders in having the right conversations. A system is only as good as the people operating it. Fundamental to a performance system is having people leaders who are willing and able to use it effectively. A key to being effective is the ability to have the right conversations with their direct reports in the right way at the right time. This is an undeveloped skill in many businesses because often leaders are promoted due to their individual performance and overall experience. Providing feedback in the right way is often part of, say, a new line manager program, but for those so-called experienced managers, if they don't know how to do it properly after a while, it can be hard to admit because they feel like they should, and therefore they assume they can. One final point to consider. There is no such thing as a neutral performance system, and context always matters. Every framework you use, whether it's KPIs, OKRs, incentives, scorecards, they nudge behavior in certain directions and pull it away from others. What that looks like in practice will differ depending on, say, the type of work, the maturity of the team, the level of capability, the commercial context, and other factors. So the real question is perhaps not, is this the right framework? It's, given our context, what behaviors is this system encouraging, and which one might it unintentionally be suppressing? That's why two organizations can use the same tool and get very different results. So when you step back, what this really comes down to is this. Most KPI systems don't fail because KPIs are a bad idea, and they don't suddenly succeed because you rename them OKRs. They fail because leaders expect the framework to work for them. What we've talked about today is that performance measures are only ever signals. They tell you how things are going, but they don't make things go better on their own. When measures aren't working, the problem is rarely the measures themselves. The issue is usually that the measures aren't integrated in a broader people system. They're vague or poorly defined, they're not followed up properly, or leaders just aren't equipped to have the right conversations off the back of them. Once you see that, the conversation shifts from what framework should we use to how are we actually leading performance here? And that's a much more useful question. If you're honest with yourself, it's worth asking, where is this showing up in my business right now? Is it that KPIs, they technically exist, but they don't really influence behavior? Are there measures that are argued and rather than being acted on? Is it a system that looks good on paper but quietly gets ignored? Or are there managers who have the data but just don't know what to do with it? You don't need to fix everything at once, but noticing where friction actually is can be a good first step to making that progress. That's enough thinking for today. I'll let you get back to it. If you found this episode useful, feel free to share it with someone who might get value from it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like the video and subscribe to the channel to see future episodes. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can follow the show. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star rating or short review really helps more people discover it. New episodes come out regularly. See you in the next one.